from Africa. You could not print something like that in the United States and let people see that the richest man to ever live
Mhm.
was a black man. So that really scared. I mean, Mansa Musa gave away over $20 million in gold on his pilgrimage to Mecca.
Enyanu na adofo akwaba. Now, if you don't understand what that means, Enyanum is brothers and sisters, and Adolfo is loved ones, and Akwaba is welcome. So that's my language, Tree and Fanti in Ghana. So Emmanuel, Akwaba to you.
Welcome, my brother. Greetings and ashe to you is what they say in the Yoruba people, which means so be it.
All right. Glad to hear.
So be it.
Yeah. So welcome back to the channel. This is King Anan. We've got a really special guest today. Now on this channel, I create content on how to bridge the gap between continental Africans and the African diaspora. Now I know in previous videos that you've probably seen, if you lucky to subscribe to this channel, that I usually say the African American diaspora, but that's only because I live in the United States. But if you're in a diaspora anywhere around the world, you're definitely welcome to check out this content. You know, it's welcome, Akwaba. Check out the rest of my videos. And today we're gonna have a really interested, deep and layered conversation. The gentleman that you're looking at right now, I actually just met last night, just yesterday. If you all are familiar with the app, the new app, Clubhouse, I just jumped into a room because it had the title. I believe the title. What was the title? I can't really remember.
Africans and African Americans Unite.
Right, Africans and African Americans United. So that's a title that's definitely going to grab my attention because I'm all about Africa. I'm African first, even though I've lived in the United States for quite a long time. I consider myself African first, and I'm definitely interested in anything having to do with Africa and rebuilding Africa. So last night we had a really interesting conversation. It was me, the gentleman before you, Emmanuel, who's actually an author and a historian. I think I can call you a historian, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah. And, he lives in the United States. I'm gonna let you go ahead and give us your background, of course, but he lives in the state of New York, and he's of Cameroonian descent. But Emmanuel, just go ahead and let us know a bit about you, your background, your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, my father is from Cameroon and my mother is from Chicago. So as I mentioned in the group last night, I share the pain and the joy of both sides of being an African and being an African American. So a little bit of background on me. Both of my parents instilled in me the glorious history of ancient Africa. And my father particularly never allowed me to have that dull mentality that my entire line of heritage was slavery. And he always wanted to remind me of my ancient kings and queens. My father played for the Cameroon Indomitable Lions, the football team. So in the 60s, and he came to this country for a better education. And as he started the family with my mother, I noticed growing up that, there was a lot of divide amongst the African Americans and then the Africans. And that really sparked me as I grew up. I came up into the hip hop industry because I love hip hop. Shout out to Tupac and DMX and all of those guys, Biggie, right, Jay-Z, all of those guys that really inspired me to get in that business. But I did that for 15 years. And then after my father passed, I really dug back into my lineage. I'm remembering the things that he taught me, how I would be that one to possibly spark bridging the gap between Africans and African Americans. So here I am 5 years later as an African historian, just traveling to different cities and states. And we would have been traveling to a lot more countries in Africa if it weren't for the pandemic. But that slowed a little bit of our progress. But so to speak, we plan to do that in the near future and make connections with our African brothers and sisters like yourself doing remarkable things.
Awesome. So what was it like? You currently live in the state of New York, right? I believe Buffalo, you said.
Yes.
Is that where you grew up?
Yep. Yep.
So tell us a little bit of like, what was your upbringing like? What type of household were you in? Because you said your mother is African American, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because
My mother, my mother was part of like a civil rights movement, and she was affiliated with the Black Panthers.
okay.
And she was a part of many different civil rights movements growing up because she was like a pro-Black African American woman. And I think even connecting with my father was a part of her journey to reconnect with Africa.
Mhm.
She did her ancestry, and her ancestry was 71% African, mixed with Congo, Cameroon, and Nigeria.
Okay.
So, and then she had sprinkles of European and Native American in there as well.
Mhm.
But my household, we grew up predominantly in the Black community, in the urban community, and then we moved to a more Caucasian community as we got older. So that was kind of tough for us, just adjusting to the changes, the racism that we endured, and also just the differences between the cultures with the African American side and the American side and the African side. So those adjustments, grew strengthened me to say, for the Africans, we have to unite. We are all from the same place. We know that we all originate in Africa. Even science, Professor Leakey, Mary Leakey, they came to the conclusion that life started in Africa. So science even proves that as well. So bridging that gap. And this is not just important for Africans, brother. This is important for every human on the planet to stop degrading Africa, because Africa is the center of all of our originality, where we all originate from.
Absolutely.
So that's what I talk about in a lot of my seminars, is getting us all on that level to say, Africa is not just this place where people live in mud huts and don't have any civilization and are poor and flies flying around their heads and whatnot. It's more than what we see. So I just tried to bring that enlightenment to the table. But growing up, I noticed that my African American peers were not educated on Africa at all.
Right.
And I constantly found myself educating as a young man. And it was sometimes very stressful, because if somebody just Black says, you swinging on trees like Tarzan, that hurts, because that's one of your own brothers and sisters. And as I grew up, I had to learn about the oppression that African Americans faced here in this country. And you're taught it over and over that your history started in slavery. And I knew so much more than that. And I'm sure you knew as well. But this is what is pushed to African American youth. So I felt it was my duty to start educating. So I started with writing a book, which is the book here, I Black Pharaoh, Rise to Power. It's on Amazon. Shout out to Pennant Publications for putting this out. This caused a lot of controversy for me. To see an African man as the Pharaoh scared a lot of people.
We're gonna go. We're gonna go into that later on in this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be dropping the link of the book in the description box below, the Amazon link. So please do go ahead and check it out and support the brother. So yeah, I mean, what you were saying in terms of you growing up and the misconceptions of Africa, definitely resonated with me. A lot of people our age that might have moved from Africa when they were younger. And grew up here in the United States, or might have even been born here in the United States to African parents, I think had some of the same experiences that you had and I had growing up, trying to educate people, not only even just Black people here, not only just African Americans, but even white people. Because if we all in America here live among white people, so
right.
some white people might ask you questions, the same type of questions that they ask me, like do they have lions and tigers walking around in the streets, or
Right.
you guys live on houses in the trees and stuff like that. And
Right.
at that age, I didn't even know how to answer that question because I wasn't thinking about that. I didn't think that
Right.
white people would be that misinformed. So I believe that there are some emotional scars and wounds, and so growing up, how did you deal with that? How did you deal with those type of like wounds and, emotional scars.
My mother, me being a direct descendant of the Bantu tribe, which is connected to the Zulu tribe. So when you look at my last name, Kulu, it is derived from the Zulu tribe.
Okay.
But Kulu was a very unusual name to African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I had to face different criticism, so to speak, and challenges with people with being different in this country, so to speak. So people would say Kulu, Zulu, Voodoo, and all these different things and make fun of my last name.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that for a while. And I even talked to my mother and said, Mom, how come I can't have your maiden name, which was Smith, to be considered more normal? And she told me, she said, son, don't you ever be ashamed of your African glory. She said, I'm still trying to connect to mine.
Right.
She said, and you have it. It's right in front of you. It's right on your name. Be very proud. Mm-hmm. And from then on, I had a different approach, brother. I had a different approach to my father. Always kept me with the mind state of you are royal king and queen. You are royal king. Your family are from royalty. Mm-hmm. And to remember that, he always taught me about the kingdom of Benin. He always taught me about the great Zimbabwe. He taught me about ancient Egypt. And I remember just asking about King Tut being a white man. And he was like, King Tut was not a white man. So when I my brother, he actually did a sculpture of King Tut for a 4th grade project. And my father made sure he was a black man. So that was really good. And my brother got a really good grade on it, but it was inspirational for my future as to what I would be and what I would be doing.
Okay. Definitely inspirational. So let's talk about how we met last night virtually. I'm sure the viewers, whoever's watching this, you might have heard of this application Clubhouse. You might not be on it if you're an Android user, unfortunately, because right now it's only available for iPhone users. But the room that you started, what led you to start that room?
I came out of another room earlier yesterday, and it was disturbing to me. It was called Black Men Ask Africans Tough Questions.
Okay. Yeah, I did see.
Yeah. And it was a disaster. It was a literal disaster. It was hate thrown back and forth. There were things said that Africans were the reasons why they traded, African Americans into slavery, sold them out, so to speak. And it's just a great miseducation. I mean, yes, that did happen. Right. in certain areas, but in others, there were people who were kidnapped. There were children who were kidnapped, and it tormented Africans as well. There's African stories of people who looked at the sea and saw death because they were so afraid to come towards the sea, mm-hmm. because they felt they would be captured or their children would be captured because of transatlantic slave trade. Now, these are stories well known in African culture. So it wasn't just, some greedy people trading, even though that did happen as well, trading slaves. But even in that case, they thought that more than likely that these Africans would go into servitude is what happened in Africa. Mm-hmm. But it was a different form of slavery that they had never seen before, and quite a catastrophic one for the African Americans. So my goal creating that group is to have those conversations, is to talk about those things in a positive light and not be negative as the other group was, but to actually put our feelings out there and come up with solutions on how we can unite as a diaspora.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I hear that that argument, that narrative a lot from African Americans, and I don't blame them in terms of being upset at Africans that they traded their brothers and sisters away. But what I always ask is, and caution people, is that where are you getting that information from? Are you getting that information from history books, from Google? Where exactly? You got to consider the source, because if the source is a white person that's actually feeding you that information, what is the purpose? You got to look behind everything that you read and everything that you hear. I mean, what is the purpose that they are feeding you that information? Are they feeding you that information to keep you divided? Because at this point, if we stay divided, the plight of Black people around the world is just going to stay the same as it's been hundreds of years. So the hurt is there. I definitely understand the hurt. It's there, but we got to move forward.
Yeah.
We gotta, you know, as hard as it might sound, we gotta move forward from the hurt and try to find productive solutions for us.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask you, I kind of want to go back a little bit. Were you born here in the United States?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And the first time that you went back to Africa or, you know, Cameroon, how old were you?
6 years old. My
6. Okay.
grandmother had passed away, and we went home.
Okay.
And it was a great reception back home to be in the village, to really see how my family lived back home, to see where my father grew up in Boya, Cameroon, Douala, where his mother lived. Just beautiful history that was there. Just seeing my family, seeing what my father accomplished as a soccer player there, how the people loved him there. It was amazing to me. And,
Right.
you know, we mentioned in the group yesterday, in the Facebook room, about, not Facebook, the Clubhouse, I'm sorry.
Right.
In the Clubhouse room, we mentioned that that America seems to get the best of the best Africans. And I was applauding that brother who mentioned that, because that's very true. Because when a person decides, I'm leaving my family and I'm going to the US to do all he has to do to get through the immigration process, to get to this country, he's already put himself in the mindset of being successful
Right.
while he's here. And that's a lot different from the African Americans who were taken and placed in systematic racism. So our goal, our job as Africans of the diaspora, more connected to our heritage, to be able to educate and give the glory back to our African American brothers and sisters. So going back home really empowered me to do that, to bring that back to the Americas, and just constantly going back and forth, home here, home here, home here, just gave me more knowledge, more understanding, and just bringing that to the U.S. You know,
Right.
and now we're finding that so many people who are doing their ancestry are from Cameroon, are from Nigeria, are from Ghana. You know, so we're discovering these things, and we're finding a lot of our family members right here. So those are things that I felt that I needed to do at that time, and as science has gotten better, it just makes it more relevant.
Right, right. That's great. And to expand upon the point that you made a little bit earlier about Africans who immigrate to the United States and do really well, the brother who made that point yesterday was he made a really excellent point that in terms of, for example, Nigerians are one section of Africans who come to the United States. 90% of Nigerians that come here are really successful, and their children really strive in terms of education. You know, a lot of them have either doctorates or PhDs. They do really well in this country. And what the brother was saying was that once they get through immigration is basically a filtering process. They filter out the people who they think are going to do really well in America, are going to do really well in this side of the world, to help build America to be a better place, a much more prosperous place. And I never really thought about immigration like that before. So that was a really, really great point, because Nigerians do really well in this country. I mean, they're hustlers because their country is full of people, and they got to do whatever they can to make
Especially the Edo people, the Edo brothers and sisters, they come to this country and do well. You know, and here's another thing, brother, is that my father put in me since I was a child. He had a soccer team here in Buffalo called the Black Stars.
Okay.
And that represented anybody of the diaspora. So we had Egyptians, we had Ethiopian players, he had South African players, he had Cameroonian players, he had players that played from Nigeria, players that played from Angola. All of these Africans were just united through soccer and here in Buffalo. And we would go to their houses, they would come to our house, and everyone who was my father's friend was uncle. Everyone, you know, no matter what part of Africa they was from. And that also gave me a different look on Africa.
Right.
Just every time I see an African brother now, no matter where he's from in Africa, that's my brother. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I want to bring that mind state to the diaspora as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all one people, basically. You know, we have some of the same customs, traditions, even though African Americans here have their own customs and traditions, but there are certain similarities. The brother that directed the movie Black Panther, he said that when he was doing research for that movie, he went to live in one of the townships in South Africa, and he got to hang out with the elders there, and he could see a reflection of himself and his friends back home in Oakland, where he's from, in those elders and those older men, because some of the things like the mannerisms and some of the different characteristics of those men, he could understand himself a lot better. And I say this to ask you this question: like, when you visit Africa, do you see? Let me put it this way. So a good number of African Americans are considering visiting Africa. It's something that started bubbling within the last few years. And what I always say to the people that might ask me about Ghana or Africa is that when you visit, you'll see a reflection of yourself in Africa. Africa is like looking in a mirror, because that's really where you're from. You get to understand yourself a lot better. So do you feel that? Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. And you got to do it on the ground level. Yeah, I'm not just saying go to the tourist sites. You need to be in the village. You need to make some connections with people back home, and be careful with that as well, because everyone doesn't mean you well either.
Right.
But you do need to try to make some connections on the ground level to visit a lot of these villages. One thing when it comes to African Americans, they're the only people on the face of the earth that have been completely severed from their history. I mean, you can ask an Italian who's never been to Italy, what food do they eat in Italy? And they can tell you, because the heritage was passed down. But if you ask an African American about fufu or a goosey soup or pepper soup or peanut butter soup or things of that nature, they don't know that. If you ask them about the traditions, the cultures, they don't know about that. So this is our role as Africans of the diaspora, to really reach out to our African American brothers and sisters and have empathy for what they've gone through, what their ancestors have gone through for 400 years, to know why it's kind of held them down. I mean, we know generational curses exist, and we know mental health exists. Same thing for what's going on in Egypt. Same thing, brother. Being pushed south. The Black Africans are being pushed south. And this is happening all over the world. This is even happening in India, where the dark races are being pushed down. So these are things that are happening. And I think education is really the starting point to helping our peers, our African American brothers and sisters, to get on the same level with us and to unite. And they could be a big help to Africa at this moment. They could be a big help. There are brothers in America, African American brothers and sisters, doing remarkable things.
Absolutely.
They were to go back home, the things that they can do, import, export, with all of these different things, if we were to take hold of our resources and take hold of the media in certain areas, if we were to be able to utilize it to Africa's advantage, then we would be a lot further along.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely need to extend our hand, not just the Africans that are in the diaspora, but Africans back home, to let our brothers and sisters know, brothers and sisters who are here, know that we need them, because and I said this last night, that we're all blessed that we got to attend some of the best institutions in the world. Some of us went to HBCUs, some of us went to the Harvards and the Yales and Columbias and what have you. And we have all the skills. We've learned all the skills. We have the abilities, our gifts, and we can apply those to Africa. The white man is only going to give us so much in this country. We're only going to be able to earn so much. Even from the civil rights movement, they gave us a little bit. But they're still trying to take it back. Laws can always be amended. Civil Rights Acts and all those laws, they always can be amended. But Transitioning to Africa, again, is not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it because we're not just doing it for us. We're doing it for the next generation and the generations after that. So that's the type of mindset that I believe that we need to have in order to.
And you make a good point. If you remember when we spoke about yesterday, when we talked about there's a such thing as Chinatown, there's a such thing as Little India.
Right.
We can have an African cultural gathering or economic system, just like all the other races do. But it may be considered to be a threat to the government, so to speak. But we all want to live in harmony with everybody. We want to trade, but we want to take hold of what is ours, and Africa belongs to us. So that's a big part of it. Is being able to establish an economic system of trade. When you go to places like the Congo, right, you will find that there are mines that are surrounded by soldiers. And then you have people flying in from different countries, flying into these mines, sucking out of the resources and flying back out, no passport, nothing. This is exactly what's happening in Africa right now. Yeah. And the common people of the Congo can do nothing about it, or they'll be shot down dead. So a lot of it is political as well. So that's another discussion, but definitely it's some things that we can help from the diaspora from over here because we have a good understanding of business here.
Right.
So there's things that we can help the diaspora back home, people who don't really know what's going on outside. And as a person who's done countless interviews, I noticed that most of the media that is in Africa is stationed in France, stationed in Saudi Arabia, and stationed in Britain. And they have some in the US as well. So they can paint whatever picture they want in the media of Africa. And this is why when people say, hey, I don't want to go home, Africa's so poor, every time they see Africans, they see us with bugs flying around our heads, big bellies, skinny bodies, and hungry, starving, disease, civil unrest. They're highlighting those things and they're putting that in the media.
Right.
They're not talking about what's really going on. And then the education system in Africa is very similar to the education system in America. You know what I'm saying? But we were oral teachers. So Africans, we taught stories. We told stories about our history. Right. And our ancestors passed them down and down and down. But when it came to the African Americans, they lost those stories. So it's on us to help them to reconnect with their ancestry. There's many different streams, as the one brother in the group was mentioning yesterday, the ancestry, the history, and ultimately the pilgrimage back home.
Okay. Emmanuel, you shed some light on something that I have never really thought about before last night, but was really, really interesting to me. You have mentioned that when our leaders in the past, like Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, passed away or were assassinated, what have you, in the past, there was nothing that followed after that in terms of the vision that they had for their countries and the rest of Africa as Pan-Africanness. So you mentioned that what we need to adopt is a council, right? Can you expand upon that?
African nations have always been leader driven. That's what I was mentioning yesterday, is that we've been leader driven. And when Shaka, Kwame, Gaddafi, or Patrice Lumumba, Nelson Mandela, when those guys passed away, there was no one on the same mission that they were on at the level that they were at. Same here in the United States with Dr. King. Same with Malcolm X, same with Garvey. There was no one after them to carry the movement forward. Yes, we start to see a resurgence now. So the council thing that I was mentioning is taking a page out of European society, taking a page out of their book, so to speak. When the 100-Year War happened between European nations, which caused a scramble for Africa, when Europeans were fighting each other for resources. They were dying from the Black Death, and just many different, civil unrest going on at the time, overusing of their land. They came up with a plan, the Council of Berlin, which we spoke about as well, to divide up Africa. And this is where you start to see the Council of Berlin was a little bit later, but before that, around the 1400s, you started to see mercenaries being sent out from Europe
Right.
to these prosperous African
Mhm.
countries and kingdoms to pillage the resources, to divide, to conquer. And that's what we see in South Africa with apartheid. And those things eventually they just carved the country of Africa between all the nations of Europe. Eventually, with divide and conquer tactics, with coup d'etats, destroying of leaders, assassination of leaders. And when we just mentioned a few African leaders, there are literally hundreds
Mhm.
of African leaders who were assassinated for taking a stand against colonization. So I challenge everyone out there to please look up those resources to see all the African leaders that were assassinated. It's more than Kwame or Patrice Lumumba. It's a lot more than that. Um, so just to name a few, these are things that we have to be educated on, and also things that we would have to protect ourselves from as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The kings and queens, the information is out there. You just got to do your research. Living in this country, we're so distracted by what I call shiny ball syndrome, which is all the different things that we have access to, the entertainment, the NFL, the NBA, what have you, Netflix and all that. We spend our time doing that, but we need to spend our time knowing ourselves. I have one of my mottos is know thyself. Once
Mm-hmm.
you you really know yourself and know who you are, there's nothing that can really stop you in this world. You can accomplish anything beyond your wildest dreams. One of the reasons why Black people, I feel that we're behind is because we don't really know who we are. And that starts from knowing Africa and connecting with Africa, and because Africa should be our base. All the other different races have a base, just like you were saying before with the Italians. They know their culture. Even if a second or third generation Italian is born here in the United States, they know where they're from. They know their culture through food, everything else. Which food is huge as far as culture.
Right.
They know that. So we need to reconnect. We need to definitely reconnect with our culture, with our past, with our history, with our base, and that's what Africa is.
We also, and even our brothers back home, brother, a lot of our brothers back home are not aware of the history as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was in a clubhouse group, and I met with some Sudan. I was in a Sudanese group, and I asked one of the Sudanese brothers, "Are you aware that your ancestors were great people that were referred to as Ethiopians, Nubians, Kushites?" And some people did not know.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with modern day Ethiopians or Eritreans. They didn't know about Abyssinia. They didn't know about the Aksum. They didn't know about these kingdoms. It's not being taught in their school, and it's right in their homeland, and they don't know. So that can only help me to conclude that miseducation is worldwide. The
Mm-hmm.
miseducation of African history is worldwide. So what we do at Black Pharaoh Universe is we want to raise the awareness of our glorious history. We have to, we turn on the TV, we're watching Black women be raped in slavery movies. We're watching Black men on the bottom of slave boats being tortured. We're watching Kunta Kinte. We need more Shaka Zulu. We need more Black Panther. We need more of these movies to show our glorious history besides the 400 years. My father always preached to me, what's 400 years to compare to 3 or 4 or 5,000 years of Black African prosperous history?
Excellence, right?
So that's what we have to form our mind on. But in order to form our mind on, we have to get educated on it.
Mm-hmm.
And not just the African Americans, the entire diaspora has to get educated on our history.
Right. Well, that's a great segue into what you actually do, Brother Emmanuel. Tell us about the book that you wrote, and you're also working on a movie, which is in the birthing stage, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what your inspiration was for these projects.
Well, originally I was going to write about my great ancestor Shaka Zulu, and there was a film that came out in 1986, a TV series, and it was called Shaka Zulu. And basically, it was the most watched television film up until 1997.
Wow.
So the interest in Africa was there in the 80s. So I know it's still there because we just saw Black Panther sell 1 billion. So the interest is still there. So I was going to do that, but I ran into some copyright issues with the original Shaka Zulu film. And it was sold so many times that they can't really track who owns the license to it. So I just kind of tabled that for now. And I said, I want to start with the Egyptian civilization. And my choices were between a civilization that was great, just like the Zulu kingdom. And my choices were between ancient Mali and ancient Egypt. Those were the two that I narrowed down to. Due to the lack of historical records of the rise of Mansa Musa, I just didn't figure I could make a historical fiction out of that because there's so many missing pieces to his rise. But that's a story that definitely needs to be told. But so I decided to start with ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. So I started writing, I started researching a king called Tutmosis III, who was the greatest conquering pharaoh, who conquered as far south as Nubia and the Eritrea area as well, and the land of Punt, which would be the Somaliland, and as far as what we call modern day Palestine, north.
Yeah.
So this was a conquering pharaoh. Many refer to him as the Napoleon of Kemet, of ancient Egypt. So I found him to be an interesting character, kind of like Shaka, and the queen, which is Queen Hatshepsut, was the first African woman, was the second African pharaoh, but she reigned the longest for 20 years. She sat on the throne. So I thought those two stories combined would be a great story. And this is what I, Black Pharaoh, Rise to Power is about. It's about the story of the rise of two pharaohs, the first great female pharaoh and this conquering warrior pharaoh. And I put it into a great historical fiction to paint the picture of Black Africa in Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, we're definitely miseducated upon the history of Africa. I mean, it goes back hundreds and thousands of years, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's a African American brother who currently lives in Ghana. He's been living in Ghana for years and years. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Obadeli Kambon.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Okay, I'm gonna drop his link down below so you can check him out. But he's actually a historian. He's a professor at the University of Ghana, Legon.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
He's actually a polyglot. He speaks several languages. And the first time I started watching him was a couple of years ago, and he taught me a lot about ancient Egypt and Kush. And he said that the first math was actually taught in Kush, in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of that. And a lot of Africans are not aware of that. And this is what leads to the fact that we're not really proud of who we are and where we come from, because we don't know our history.
Yeah, math, science,
Right.
astrology, studying the stars, the zodiac. I mean, you're talking about architecture, everything. I mean, the Japanese tried to redo the pyramids and they couldn't cut the limestone at the precisions that Africans did it. Africans were perfectionists. We were perfectionists.
Right.
And you mentioned Kush. There's more pyramids in Kush than there is in Egypt. So that's something that needs to be discussed, is, the lack of understanding about the Kushite dynasty as well, that they had. But, it's so much misinformation. As I mentioned earlier, there's Sudanese people who have no clue of their great ancestry with the Kushite dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
So biblical history, the Bible mentions Ethiopians, Egyptians. It mentions Africans throughout the Bible in connection with the Israelites. So it's in our history. It's in the religious history. It's in the Quran as well as the Bible. It's all over. But for the most part, it's been whitewashed when it comes to the glorious history of Africa. I looked in I believe it was a 1964 edition of National Geographic, and they had Mansa Musa as a white man. Wow. So this was clearly the agenda, right, to take glory away from Africa. You could not print something like that in the United States and let people see that the richest man to ever live was a black man. So that really scared. I mean, Mansa Musa gave away over $20 million in gold on his pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? This guy built the first universities in
Timbuktu, right?
In Timbuktu, yeah.
Right.
And the mosque, I mean, educational centers. I mean, the Great Benin Wall was bigger than the Great Wall of China. I mean, we have so much history, and that's in the Guinness Book World of Records in 1974. So there's so many things that we just need to know about. You know, it was thought that Africans weren't metal workers. Well, I suggest you go back to ancient Egypt. I suggest you go to ancient Benin and look at the head of Ife. These were metalworking guys who used many different metal alloys and brought them into one piece of structure. So this history, a lot of our history is sitting in these French and Britain museums right now. Right now, Emmanuel Macron is mentioned that he will send some back, but there's literally thousands of African, tools and things that were sent out, shipped out, sold to European travelers who were just traveling, and they ended up selling them to museums. So many of our architectural structures and things like that, things that we constructed were taken. Our masks, our weapons that we had of those times. Yeah, and they're in these different museums in Europe. They're not even in Africa anymore. So, it's things that we have to even go abroad. We have to go to the UK. We need to see these things in order to say, wow, this really happened to us. This really happened. And once we realize that, then we can start making some changes.
Absolutely. So viewers, if you're enjoying this content, please make sure you give the video a big thumbs up. It's really going to help push it out there so other people can see this, because we definitely need to consume this type of content. We definitely need to learn about ourselves, because we have a great, rich history, and you should definitely be proud to have African ancestry. Right? So this has been a really, really great conversation, Emmanuel, brother. I really, really appreciate you. You're a solid brother. He actually kind of invited himself onto my channel as soon as he found that I was a content creator on YouTube. He said, "Man, I'd love to come onto your channel and just share my knowledge." So I really, really appreciate you. Before we go, is there any final words that you want to share with the people out there?
I just want to say that there's many different ways for the diaspora to connect. Right now, there's the internet where you can find this history, this hidden history, and you have to be careful with sources, but try to look for things that have other credible sources that validate it as well, to discover these historical facts, because there is a lot of pseudoscience out there. But history, knowing the history is so important. It's so important. When I do a lot of my seminars, a lot of my brothers and sisters do not come out. It's I'm telling you,
that's sad.
Mostly Europeans, and as well as other races, and they love it. They absolutely love it, because the truth is, we all originate in Africa. We all originate in Africa, and that's the truth. Africa is really a place where we all, as a human race, can unite, because this is all where it started.
Yep. And then
we all just spread out. Right. And really the difference between race, it has nothing to do with intellect. It has to do with hot heat and ice, as Ivan Van Sertman said. So
the environment. Yep.
That's it. We're darker because we're our ancestors are closer to the melanin. Yep. So
the equator.
That's it. That is the difference between humankind. So we have to get our minds on that. We have to get the diaspora together. And if you feel disconnected from your heritage, go do that ancestry.com. It's worth it. It's worth it. There's a bunch of different ones out there. There's AfricanAncestry.com. There's 23andMe. Figure out which one is the most, credible for yourself, and find out who you are. Spend that, because it matters. It matters to you, and make that connection. Learn your history. Make the pilgrimage back to Africa. Make connections. That's what I think we need to do as a people.
Right, and then don't be afraid to share your, your DNA because you think that there might be some kind of malicious intent behind the DNA? Because I've heard that excuse also. It's up to you. If finding your ancestry is more important than what you think a company might be doing with your DNA, then it's something that you should do. It might be easy for me to say because I already know where I'm from, but still, I might even do it because I learned yesterday that, I can find my brothers and sisters who might be here because, I'm from Ghana, and Ghana was a passageway of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of my ancestors were taken from Ghana as well as Cameroon as well. So, I probably have some long lost brothers and sisters here in America or even South America somewhere,
And you'll find, like in Cameroon, very close connection to the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
So even us doing our ancestry, even though we know we're from directly from Africa, we may find other, blood types in our blood as well, DNA types in Africa.
Right.
We may find out we're related to people in South Africa and related to people in the Congo and North Africa as well. So those are things that we also can find out as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. Well, I really, really appreciate this conversation that we had, brother. I really, really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your knowledge. Now, before we end this conversation, I just want to leave you guys with one thing. Not all Black people will stick together, but the ones who do will be the ones who will build the future. And with that, on behalf of Emmanuel Kulu, King Anan, myself, we're bridging the gap between continental Africans and the African diaspora around the whole world. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next video.